There's a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. You know the one. You wake up already exhausted by everything you're not doing, not becoming, not managing to change. The list grows longer while you grow heavier. This isn't laziness, and it isn't weakness. For most of your life, you've probably been told that willpower is something you either have or you don't. That successful people possess some internal engine the rest of us are missing. And when you can't make yourself do the thing you know would help, meditate, exercise, break the pattern, start the practice, you conclude the problem is you. Just try harder. Be more disciplined. Get it together. But what if the entire framework is wrong? The Buddha's first teaching wasn't about thinking positive thoughts or manifesting dreams. It was honest in a way that feels rare now. He said, there is suffering woven into this human experience. Not as punishment, not because you did something wrong, just as part of being alive. The gap between who you are and who you sense you could be, that restless feeling that something needs to shift but you can't quite reach it. The Buddhist tradition calls this dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, the ache of impermanence touching everything we try to hold still. But here's what matters. If suffering has a cause, it can be understood. And what can be understood can be transformed. There's an ancient teaching, and the mind is everything. What you think, you become. So what if the problem isn't what we think it is? If it feels right, share in the comments where you're listening from, your city, or just the time of day. And if you can, get comfortable. This is meant to be received gently, not conquered. Let's begin. In Buddhist understanding, karma isn't fate or cosmic punishment from some external judge. It's simpler than that, and far more empowering. Karma means intentional action. When we act with wisdom and care, we plant seeds of peace. When we act from confusion or harm, we plant seeds of future suffering. The universe doesn't judge this. It simply reflects it back, like an echo in a canyon. Here's the principle. If we're not consciously creating new karma, new patterns, new actions, new responses, then old karma keeps recreating us. The past doesn't just influence the present. When we're not actively choosing, the past becomes the present, over and over, in an endless loop. Imagine a small boat on a quiet bay. Beautiful day, calm water, no urgency. But there's a small leak, and water is slowly seeping in. Someone notices and says, "We should bail this water out, or row to shore." The response comes easily, but that's effort. That's uncomfortable. Right now, everything feels fine. Let's just enjoy the view. And for a while, it is fine. The water rises slowly, barely noticeable. Easy to tell ourselves we'll deal with it later when it becomes a real problem. Except by the time it feels like a real problem, the boat is sinking. And now, instead of the mild inconvenience of bailing water, there's the real danger of swimming in cold, deep water. This is what happens when we're not actively creating new patterns. The boat doesn't stay stable just because we're not paying attention. The leak doesn't pause out of kindness. Doing nothing isn't neutral. It's choosing to let the old momentum continue. And here's what makes it even more complex. We're not just dealing with our own momentum. We're swimming in a river of collective momentum. What everyone around us thinks, wants, values, fears. The culture we live in has its own current. If you're not consciously swimming in a direction you've chosen, the current decides for you. Waking up one day, wearing clothes you don't remember choosing, believing things you never actually examined, wanting things someone else told you to want. This isn't a conspiracy. It's just what happens when we're not present. When we're not the captain of our own ship, someone else's map determines where we go. The Buddhist teaching points to something both humbling and liberating. We are competing with our own history. Every habitual thought 1,000 times, has carved a groove in the mind. Every reactive pattern repeated has become a superhighway of least resistance. The brain doesn't ask if the pattern serves you. It just notices, oh, we do this. This is familiar. Let's do it again. And if today, right now, there's no new seed being planted, no new possibility being watered, no new response being chosen, then yesterday wins. Last year wins. The entire weight of conditioning wins by default. But here's the part that makes this bearable. Everything arises from causes and conditions, including motivation, energy, willpower. Nothing appears from nowhere. Which means if you understand the causes, you can work with them. You're not doomed by the past. You're simply living out its momentum until you choose to create something new. And that choice? It can start today. It can start in the next breath. The question isn't whether you have enough willpower. The question is, are you planting seeds, or are you letting old seeds keep growing the same garden? Now, if this were a typical talk about motivation, the advice would be to set goals, make plans, push harder. But the Buddhist approach is different. It begins with understanding what's actually in the way. Not some vague thing called laziness, but specific patterns, identifiable obstacles that can be seen, understood, and worked with skillfully. A teacher named Shantideva, who lived over 1,000 years ago, identified 3 types of what we call laziness. But these aren't character flaws or moral failures. They're simply patterns, habits of the mind that can be understood and shifted. The first is what you'd expect: the attachment to comfort, the endless postponement, the seduction of doing nothing. But the second and third are subtler, more insidious, and often completely invisible. The second is busyness disguised as productivity, filling life with 1,000 small distractions, so there's never time for what actually matters. The third is the cruelest, the story that says you're not capable, that this path isn't for people like you, that you've already tried and failed, so why bother trying again? These 3 patterns, comfort-seeking, distraction, and self-doubt, block more genuine transformation than any external obstacle ever could. And the painful part? They rarely appear clearly because they feel so reasonable, so justified, so much like just how things are. But the practice the Buddha taught isn't about fighting these patterns or hating yourself for having them. It's about gentle awareness. Simply noticing, without judgment, when these patterns appear. Just noticing. When the hand reaches for the phone at the first hint of boredom, notice. When the thought arises, I'll start tomorrow, notice. When the mind whispers, this isn't for me, I'm not the kind of person who can do this, notice. That awareness itself, that simple act of seeing clearly, begins the transformation. Not through force, not through shame, but through the light of understanding meeting what's actually happening. There are people who seem naturally disciplined, naturally devoted to their practice. And it's easy to think, that's just not who I am. I'm the one who starts things and doesn't finish them. I'm the one who gets inspired and then drifts away. And because that story gets believed, it keeps being true. Until the pattern gets seen clearly. Not with judgment, just with clarity. You're not incapable. There's just a story about being incapable. And that story becomes a reason not to try. It's uncomfortable to see. But it's also the crack that lets the light in. Because once you see the pattern, you can't quite unsee it. And once you see it clearly, you have a choice. Keep believing the story, or plant a different seed. Understanding these 3 patterns matters. Not because understanding magically dissolves them. It doesn't. But because you can't work skillfully with something you can't see. And when you finally see what's been blocking you all along, when you see it not as a fatal flaw, but as a pattern that arose from causes and conditions. The path forward becomes clear. Not easy, but clear. We're going to look at each of these patterns closely, not to judge them, not to shame ourselves for recognizing them, but to understand them so completely that they lose their invisible power. Because the truth is, you're not broken. You're not lacking some essential ingredient that other people have. You're caught in patterns that made sense once, that served a purpose once, but now keep you smaller than you actually are. And patterns can change. Slowly, gradually, one conscious choice at a time, patterns can change. Let's look at how. There's a particular kind of self-deception we're all fluent in. We know what would help us, truly help us, and yet we find endless, creative reasons not to do it. Not because we're weak, but because these reasons sound so reasonable. They don't announce themselves as obstacles. They arrive dressed as common sense, as self-care, as just being realistic. And by the time we see them for what they are, we've often spent years, sometimes decades, in their grip. Let's look at the first pattern. There's a story about Einstein that reveals something profound about how we spend our energy. He famously wore the same style of clothing every day, not because he couldn't afford variety, not because he lacked taste, but because he understood something about the mind. Every decision we make depletes a little bit of our mental energy. Choosing what to wear, what to eat for breakfast, which route to take to work, these tiny choices accumulate. And if you spend your decision-making capacity on things that don't actually matter to you, you have less available for the things that do. Einstein simplified his wardrobe to preserve his mind for physics. Artists do the same. Entrepreneurs do the same. Not out of asceticism, but out of clarity about what deserves their attention. This reveals something important about energy itself. We think of energy as something we either have or don't have, like a fuel tank that's either full or empty. But it's more nuanced than that. Energy flows toward what we value, what we prioritize, what we've decided actually matters. And when we scatter our energy across 1,000 small decisions that don't align with our deeper values, we end up exhausted by things that don't nourish us. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying comfort. There's nothing wrong with rest, with ease, with making life a little softer around the edges. The Buddhist path isn't about punishing yourself or glorifying difficulty. In fact, The Buddha himself tried extreme asceticism first. He starved himself, pushed his body to the edge of death, believed that suffering was the path to liberation. And what he discovered was, that doesn't work either. So he taught the middle way. Not indulgence, not deprivation, but a sustainable path between the two extremes. But there's a difference between necessary rest, which restores us, and attachment to comfort, which numbs us. One is wisdom. The other is avoidance, wearing wisdom's mask. Necessary rest is when you're genuinely tired and you sleep. When your body needs recovery and you give it space to heal. When you've been working intensely and you take a break to restore your capacity. This kind of rest serves your well-being. It's functional, restorative, life-giving. But attachment to comfort is different. It's when you're not actually tired, but you stay in bed for 3 more hours because getting up feels hard. It's when you don't really want to watch television, but you turn it on the moment you walk through the door because silence feels uncomfortable. It's when you know a conversation needs to happen, a difficult choice needs to be made, a pattern needs to be addressed, and you choose numbness instead. Attachment to comfort becomes a problem when we start organizing our entire lives around avoiding discomfort. When the primary question becomes not what serves my growth, but what feels easiest right now. You see this most clearly in the postponement. I'll start meditating after the holidays. I'll begin that practice when work calms down. I'll make that change once I move to the new apartment. And these aren't lies exactly. There is some truth to waiting for the right conditions. It is harder to establish a new practice when you're traveling, when you're stressed, when your routine is disrupted. But if you watch closely, you'll notice the right conditions never quite arrive. There's always another holiday, another busy season, another reason to wait. The holidays end, but then there's a work deadline. The work deadline passes, but then you're planning a trip. The trip ends, but now you're recovering from the trip. And underneath all these legitimate sounding reasons is a deeper truth. What we're really saying is, I'll do this when it stops requiring effort. And that moment never comes. The practice will always require showing up. Growth will always ask something of us. There is no future version of your life where transformation happens without you choosing it, without you meeting some edge of discomfort and deciding to stay anyway. This is where comfort becomes a relationship gone toxic. In a healthy relationship, you know when to lean in and when to create space. You know when connection serves you and when you need solitude. There's reciprocity, balance, mutual nourishment. But in a toxic relationship, everything becomes about managing the other person's needs at the expense of your own well-being. You organize your entire life around keeping them comfortable, keeping them happy, avoiding conflict at any cost. And this is exactly what happens with comfort when it becomes an attachment. You reach for your phone the moment there's a lull in conversation. You turn on the television the instant you walk through the door. You scroll through social media while waiting in line, while eating lunch, while sitting on the toilet. Not because any of these things are inherently bad, but because you've lost the ability to be with yourself without a buffer. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you sat doing absolutely nothing? No phone, no book, no music, no television, no conversation. Just you, sitting, being present with whatever arises. For most people, it's been years, maybe decades, maybe never. And when they try it, even for 5 minutes, it's almost unbearable. The mind starts racing. The body gets restless. Every itch demands to be scratched. Every impulse demands to be followed. This is what constant comfort seeking does to us. It erodes our capacity to simply be. One episode becomes 3, becomes an entire season watched in a weekend. And somewhere in there, you notice this isn't rest anymore. This is escape. You're not restoring yourself. You're hiding from something you don't want to feel. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's anxiety about the future. Maybe it's grief you haven't processed, anger you haven't acknowledged, fear you haven't faced. Maybe it's just the low-grade discomfort of being present with your own mind, which never stops commenting, never stops wanting, never stops comparing. And comfort becomes the drug that keeps you from feeling any of it. So the invitation here is simple, though not easy. Notice, just gently notice, when you reach for comfort. Is this nourishment or numbing? No judgment, just curiosity. When you pick up your phone, pause for a breath and ask, am I seeking connection or am I avoiding presence? When you pour the 3rd glass of wine, when you buy something you don't need, when you stay up too late, watching things you don't even enjoy, what are you not wanting to feel? And here's what's interesting. The feelings you're avoiding are often not as overwhelming as you fear. Loneliness, when you actually feel it, has a texture, a flavor, a quality that's bearable. Anxiety, when you stop running from it, often reveals what actually needs attention. But you can't discover this if you never stop running. The pattern starts to lose its grip the moment you see it clearly. Not when you fix it, not when you overcome it, just when you see it. Because awareness is the beginning of choice. And choice is the beginning of freedom. But here's the thing about the first pattern. It's obvious once you see it. Scrolling for hours, binging shows, postponing what matters. These are visible behaviors. You can catch yourself in the act. The second pattern is much sneakier. This one arrives disguised as productivity. It doesn't look like avoidance, because you're busy, genuinely busy, impressively busy. Your calendar is full. Your to-do list is long. You're getting things done. Just never the thing that actually matters. You'll reorganize your entire closet instead of sitting down to meditate. You'll research meditation cushions for 3 hours instead of actually meditating for 10 minutes. You'll clean the kitchen, answer emails, optimize your productivity system, all valuable things, all legitimate things. And somehow, the practice you said was important never happens. This is the distraction dance. And what makes it so effective is that the distractions are real tasks. You genuinely do need to clean the kitchen at some point. Organizing your closet is useful. Answering emails is part of being a responsible adult. But the timing is the tell. Notice when these urgent tasks suddenly appear. It's always right before you're about to do something that requires real presence, real vulnerability, real inner work. You're about to sit down to meditate, and suddenly you remember the dishwasher needs to be emptied. You're about to start that difficult conversation, and suddenly you need to check your email. You're about to practice in a way that might actually change you, and suddenly everything else becomes urgent. We fill our lives with 1,000 small urgencies, so there's never quite enough time for what would actually transform us. And because we're doing real things, useful things, we don't recognize it as avoidance. But it is. There's a teaching that these practices, meditation, mindfulness, the cultivation of wisdom, can become like a hospital. We come when we're in pain, seeking relief. And when the pain eases, we leave. We use wisdom as aspirin, not as a path. You have a crisis, a breakup, a loss, a moment of overwhelming anxiety, and suddenly, you're meditating every day. You're reading Dharma books. You're attending teachings. You're sincerely committed to transformation. And then life gets a little better. The acute pain fades. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the practice fades too. Not because you decided to quit, just because other things, work deadlines, social obligations, that project you've been meaning to start, suddenly seem more pressing. You tell yourself, I'll get back to it when things calm down. But things don't calm down. They just change shape. There's always something that feels more urgent than sitting still, than being present, than doing the interior work that no one else can see or validate. And here's what makes this pattern so difficult to recognize. The excuses are legitimate. You do have work to do. You do have responsibilities. People are depending on you. The things you're busy with aren't frivolous. They're real obligations, real commitments, real pieces of a life you're trying to hold together. But somewhere in the endless busyness, you've lost track of what you're actually building toward. You're maintaining, managing, keeping all the plates spinning. But are you growing? Are you developing the qualities that would make all of this, the work, the relationships, the daily responsibilities, feel less like burden and more like life? There's a story that captures this perfectly. An elderly person sits in a beautiful garden, phone in hand, scrolling through news they'll forget in an hour, looking at photos of people they'll never meet, reading opinions that make them agitated, but that they can't seem to stop reading. Someone walks by and asks, "Why are you on your phone? You're in this beautiful place." And the response is automatic. "I'm just checking something quickly." But an hour passes. The garden is still beautiful. The phone is still in hand. And the moment, the actual, unrepeatable moment of being alive in that garden, has passed. This isn't unique to elders or to phones. This is the human condition in the age of infinite distraction. We've created a world where every moment of potential boredom can be filled instantly, where every question can be answered in seconds, where every desire for stimulation can be immediately gratified. And we think this is progress. We think this is making life better. But what we've actually done is eliminate the space where insight arises. We reach for distraction at the first hint of discomfort because we haven't learned to be with change. But everything is always changing. Boredom changes, discomfort changes, that restless feeling changes. When we can sit with the changing moment, we don't need constant entertainment. The teaching of impermanence isn't meant to make you sad. It's meant to liberate you from the exhausting project of trying to make everything stay the same. That discomfort you're feeling right now, it will change. That boredom, it will shift into something else. That restlessness, that anxiety, that vague sense that you should be doing something other than what you're doing. Give it 5 minutes of simple presence and watch it transform. But you can't see this if you never stay still long enough to watch. The cost of constant entertainment isn't just wasted time. It's our capacity for depth. When you can't sit through a moment of boredom without reaching for stimulation, you lose the ability to sit with anything difficult. When every silence must be filled, every gap must be occupied, you lose access to the spaciousness where insight arises. The Buddha didn't discover the nature of suffering by staying busy. He discovered it by sitting still, radically, completely still, until the noise settled and the truth revealed itself. And this isn't about becoming a monk or renouncing the world or living in a cave. It's about reclaiming presence. It's about being able to choose, in any given moment, where you place your attention. Because right now, your attention isn't really yours. It's been colonized by algorithms designed to keep you scrolling, by notifications engineered to trigger urgency, by an entire economy built on the assumption that your attention is a resource to be harvested and sold. And every time you reflexively check your phone, every time you fill a quiet moment with noise, you're reinforcing the pattern. You're training your mind to need constant input, constant stimulation, constant escape from the present moment. And the present moment, as it turns out, is the only place where life actually happens. Everything else, the scrolling, the planning, the remembering, the fantasizing, is a kind of absence, a stepping away from the only reality there is. Right now, for instance, what are you avoiding by listening to this? Maybe nothing. Maybe this is exactly where your attention should be. But maybe, just maybe, there's something uncomfortable waiting for you when this ends, and part of you is using even this teaching as a way to postpone it. No judgment if that's true. Just noticing. Because the practice isn't about perfection. It's about seeing clearly. And you can't see clearly if you're always in motion, always filling the space, always running from one thing to the next. The invitation is gentle but firm. What would it be like to let yourself be bored? To sit in a waiting room without pulling out your phone, to eat a meal without the television, without scrolling, without consuming content alongside your food. What would it be like to be with yourself, unmediated, for even 10 minutes? Most people can't do it. Not because they're weak, but because we've lost the muscle. We've trained ourselves to need constant input, constant stimulation, constant escape from the present moment. But even this second pattern, sneaky as it is, can be seen. You can catch yourself reorganizing the garage when you know what you really need is to sit still. You can notice the elaborate justifications, the productive procrastination, the way you fill every moment so nothing deeper can surface. The third pattern is different. Of all the ways we block our own growth, this one cuts deepest. It's the story that we're incapable. Not just incapable today, not just struggling in this moment, but fundamentally, essentially, permanently incapable. I'm just not good at meditation. I'm not a disciplined person. I'm not spiritual enough for this. Other people can do this, but I can't. And here's what makes this pattern so destructive. It sounds like humility. It sounds like honest self-assessment. It sounds like you're just being realistic about your limitations. But it's not humility. It's a prison you've built for yourself and then locked from the inside. Humility is seeing clearly. Seeing where you are, what you're working with, what you haven't yet developed. Humility doesn't say, I'm incapable. It says, I haven't cultivated this capacity yet. That yet is everything. When we measure ourselves against others, we create suffering that didn't need to exist. Someone ahead of us becomes a reason for envy. Someone behind us becomes a reason for pride. Someone at our level becomes competition. We've turned the path into a race, and races have losers. You see someone meditating for an hour every morning and think, I could never do that. You read about someone who went on a month-long retreat and think, that's not for people like me. You meet someone who seems naturally peaceful, naturally patient, naturally wise, and you conclude, they have something I don't have. And maybe they do have something you don't have right now. Maybe they've been practicing for years. Maybe they've done the work you haven't done yet. But that yet is everything. The Buddha taught gradual training. Not because he doubted our potential, but because he understood how transformation actually works. A seed doesn't become a tree in one day. It doesn't fail by taking time. time is part of the process. You plant a seed, and for a while, nothing visible happens. The seed sits in dark soil, apparently unchanged. But beneath the surface, roots are growing, structures are forming, life is organizing itself toward emergence. And if you dig up the seed every few days to check its progress, you destroy the process. You don't look at a seedling and say, "This will never be an oak tree. Look how small it is." You understand that growth is gradual, that development has stages, that becoming takes time. And yet we do this to ourselves constantly. We compare our beginning to someone else's middle. We compare our struggle to someone else's mastery. And we conclude, not, "I haven't developed this yet," but "I am incapable of developing this ever." Listen to the words you use about yourself. "I never finish what I start." "I always give up." "I can't meditate." "This isn't for me." These absolute words, never, always, can't, isn't, are red flags. They're signals that something other than truth is speaking. Because the truth is rarely absolute. The truth is, I haven't finished some things I started. I've given up before, and I might give up again, and I might also persist. I find meditation challenging right now. This feels unfamiliar and difficult. These statements leave room for change. They describe a current state without making it permanent. When you hear yourself use these absolute words, listen. That's not truth speaking. That's fear protecting itself. Because if you're incapable, you don't have to try. If this isn't for you, you don't have to face the discomfort of being a beginner. If you've already decided you'll fail, you never have to risk the vulnerability of sincere effort. It's a kind of protection, but it's also a kind of death. Because the moment you decide, "I can't," you stop planting seeds. And if you're not planting seeds, nothing new can grow. So here's the question that changes the entire framework. Not, "Can I do this perfectly?" Not, "Can I do this as well as that person?" Not, "Can I do this without struggle or difficulty or ever feeling lost?" But simply, what's the best I can offer right now? Not tomorrow. Not when you're better, more ready, more capable. Right now, with exactly what you have, exactly where you are, what's the best you can offer? Maybe it's 5 minutes of sitting still instead of an hour. Maybe it's 3 conscious breaths instead of a formal meditation. Maybe it's noticing your impatience instead of transcending it. That's enough. More than enough. Because you're not trying to arrive at some final destination today. You're just taking one step in a direction you've chosen. And one step, taken sincerely, is everything. But there's an even deeper version of this pattern. It's not just, I can't do this today. It's, I will never be capable. This is categorical self-judgment. Permanent condemnation. The decision that your incapacity isn't situational, it's essential. I'm just not a spiritual person. I don't have what it takes. Some people are cut out for this, and I'm not one of them. And when we believe we can't change, we often also believe others can't change. We write people off. We write ourselves off. We treat temporary states as permanent truths. Someone betrays your trust, and you decide they are untrustworthy. Not, they acted in an untrustworthy way, but they are, essentially and permanently, someone who cannot be trusted. And if you do this to others, you're doing it to yourself. You make a mistake, and you decide, I am someone who always makes this mistake. You struggle with anger, and you decide, I am an angry person. You try meditation and find it difficult, and you decide, I am someone who can't meditate. But here's what the Buddhist tradition discovered through centuries of practice. The mind's essential nature is clear, like the sky. Confusion, anger, fear, these are like clouds passing through. They don't corrupt the sky. They just temporarily block the sun. You are not your worst moment, your worst pattern, your worst thought. Those are weather passing through. When you identify with the clouds, you forget the sky. You think, I am confusion. I am anger. I am fear. But you're not. You're the space in which confusion appears and dissolves. You're the awareness that notices anger arising and passing. You're the sky, not the weather. And the sky is vast enough to hold anything. This doesn't mean the weather doesn't matter. Storms are real. Clouds are real. The pain you feel, the patterns you struggle with, the ways you keep stumbling, these are real. But they're not permanent. And they're not you. There's a phrase people use to protect this pattern of self-judgment. The spiritual path is too difficult. and on the surface, it's true. Sitting still when your mind is chaos is difficult. Being patient when you feel rage is difficult. Continuing to practice when you see no immediate results is difficult. But here's what that phrase is really saying. There must be an easier way to find peace. And the Buddha's teaching is clear on this. There is no easier path to genuine peace. Imagine you're in a small boat and water is seeping in. Your companion says, "Bailing water is hard work. Rowing to shore is exhausting. Let's just enjoy the view." And yes, doing something requires effort. But doing nothing doesn't mean things stay easy. It means you sink. And swimming in cold water is much harder than bailing out the boat. There is no easier path to genuine peace. There's only, do we address this now, while we still have choices? Or wait until crisis forces us? You can spend your whole life looking for a version of transformation that doesn't require effort, doesn't require facing discomfort, doesn't require change. But it doesn't exist. You can change cities. You can change partners. You can change jobs, change your appearance, change your daily routine. And sometimes these changes help. Sometimes a new environment creates space for new patterns. But you can't change cities enough times to escape your own mind. The Buddha taught something crucial. There is no genuine, lasting well-being that doesn't involve waking up. You can't find equivalent peace by changing the external circumstances of your life. Those things might bring temporary relief, like painkillers for a broken bone. But they don't heal the fracture. Only setting the bone heals the bone. Only transforming the mind brings lasting peace. And yes, that's difficult. Yes, it requires effort. Yes, it asks you to face things you've been avoiding, to sit with discomfort you'd rather escape, to keep showing up even when you can't see progress. But what's the alternative? To spend your life seeking comfort that never quite satisfies. To fill your days with distractions that leave you feeling empty. To tell yourself you're incapable and never discover what you might actually become. There's a teaching that might sound strange at first. No one complains about having to use the bathroom every day. No one says, "This is too difficult. I have to eat. I have to sleep. I have to breathe. It's so exhausting." Why? Because there's no alternative. These are simply what it means to be alive in a body. You don't wake up and think, "Do I feel like breathing today?" You don't debate whether you're in the mood to eat. You don't wait until you're inspired to sleep. You do these things because they're required. Because without them, the body can't function. And the same is true of the mind. If you want peace, you have to cultivate peace. If you want clarity, you have to practice seeing clearly. If you want freedom from reactivity, you have to train in responding wisely. There's no plan B where you get the results without the causes. There's no shortcut where you skip the practice and arrive at the destination. So the path isn't difficult in comparison to an easier alternative. The path is just what's required. Like eating, like sleeping, like breathing. You don't have to like it every day. You don't have to feel inspired by it. You just have to do it. And when you do, when you show up, when you sit down, when you practice, even when it's hard, something starts to shift. Not because you're special, not because you finally got it right, but because you're working with the way things actually are. You're planting seeds. And seeds, given the right conditions, always grow. These three patterns, comfort-seeking, distraction, self-doubt, have been running your life for longer than you probably realize. They're subtle, they're sophisticated, and they're incredibly convincing. But they're just patterns. Not truth, not destiny, not who you actually are. Just habits of mind that arose from causes and conditions and can dissolve when met with clear seeing. The work isn't to fight them. The work is to see them. And in the seeing, in the gentle, persistent, patient seeing, something begins to loosen. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But gradually, like ice melting in spring, like clouds parting to reveal sky that was always there. You start to notice the choice points. The moment before you reach for your phone. The moment before you say, "I'll start tomorrow." The moment before you conclude, "I can't do this." And in those moments, just for a second, just for a breath, you have a choice. You can follow the old pattern, or you can plant a new seed. Both are fine. Neither makes you good or bad, successful or failing. But only one of them leads somewhere new. And if you're still listening, if you're still here, you already know which one you want to choose. These aren't things you need to acquire from somewhere outside yourself. They're not skills you lack or capacities you were born without. They're already here. Dormant perhaps, undeveloped maybe, but present. Like seeds waiting for the right conditions to sprout, like muscles that strengthen with use, these four powers live in you already. What we're doing now is simply recognizing them, naming them, learning how to cultivate what's been there all along. Interest might sound simple, almost too simple to call a power. But it's not. It's the difference between reading about water and drinking when you're thirsty. It's the difference between knowing that meditation might help and actually caring enough to sit down and do it. You can have all the intelligence in the world, all the talent, all the favorable conditions. But without genuine interest, without that pull, that curiosity, that sense of, I need to understand this, nothing moves. Interest is what makes you open the book when you're tired. Interest is what makes you sit down to practice when 1,000 other things are calling for your attention. Interest is what keeps you coming back after you've stumbled, after you've failed, after you've forgotten why you started in the first place. And here's what's crucial to understand. Interest isn't something you're born with or without. It's something you cultivate. Think about anything you've ever become genuinely interested in. Maybe it started with a chance encounter, a conversation, a moment of curiosity. But the interest deepened as you learned more, as you discovered layers you didn't know existed, as the thing revealed itself to be richer and more complex than you initially thought. The same is true here. One of the most powerful practices in the Buddhist tradition is reflecting on impermanence, including our own mortality. This isn't morbid. It's clarifying. When we truly understand that this life is temporary, that everything we're holding on to will eventually slip through our fingers, something shifts. We stop sleepwalking. We start actually living. Most of us spend our days as if we have infinite time. We postpone what matters. We waste energy on trivialities. We get lost in petty conflicts and meaningless distractions. And we do this because somewhere deep down, we believe we'll always have another chance. Another day, another year, another decade to get serious about what actually matters. But we won't. Not because life is cruel, but because life is finite. Because every day that passes is a day you don't get back. Because the people you love will not be here forever, and neither will you. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to wake you up. When you truly absorb this, not just intellectually, but in your bones, your priorities shift. The argument that felt so important suddenly seems small. The grudge you've been holding starts to feel like wasted energy. The things you've been postponing, the conversation, the practice, the change you know you need to make, suddenly become urgent. Everything is changing right now. Your body, your breath, the world around you, the people you love. This isn't sad. It's just true. And when we stop pretending otherwise, when we stop living as if everything will last forever, we stop wasting our one precious life on things that don't actually nourish us. We start choosing differently. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. This is how interest deepens. Interest grows when we understand what's actually at stake. This isn't about blind faith. The Buddha himself said, "Don't believe me. Test this. See for yourself." He wasn't asking for followers who would take his word as gospel. He was inviting people to verify the truth through their own experience. And this is crucial because interest, based on belief, is fragile. It depends on maintaining conviction even when evidence seems to contradict it. But interest based on understanding, on seeing how things actually work, is resilient. So let's be clear about what the practice offers. In the short term, we're talking days and weeks. You'll likely notice more peace, more resilience, less reactivity. These aren't theoretical benefits you have to wait years to experience. They're immediate shifts that happen when you start paying attention to your mind. When you meditate for 10 minutes and then go into your day, you might notice you don't snap at your partner as quickly. You might notice you can sit with frustration without immediately reaching for distraction. You might notice a tiny bit more space between stimulus and response. These are small things, but they matter because they're proof that the practice works. In the medium term, months and years, the benefits deepen. Relationships start to heal because you're less reactive, more present, more capable of listening without defending. You start to find meaning in ordinary moments because you're not constantly chasing the next thing. Wisdom develops, not as abstract knowledge, but as lived understanding of how suffering arises and how it can be met. And in the long term, complete freedom from suffering. This is presented not as a promise, not as something guaranteed to happen, if you just try hard enough, but as a possibility, as something that has happened for others and could happen for you. But here's what makes all of this possible. Everything arises from causes and conditions. Suffering arises from causes. Joy arises from causes. Peace, clarity, freedom, all of these arise from causes. When we understand this deeply, not just intellectually, but in our actual experience, we realize something liberating. We can work with the causes. We're not helpless victims of circumstance, tossed around by forces beyond our control. We're gardeners, planting seeds. If you want patience, you plant the seeds of patience by practicing restraint when you feel impatient. If you want clarity, you plant the seeds of clarity by paying attention when the mind is foggy. If you want peace, you plant the seeds of peace by choosing non-reactivity when provoked. This isn't magic. It's how minds work. So here's the invitation. Run small experiments. Meditate for 5 minutes and notice, do you feel different after? Not seeking magic, not expecting enlightenment, just noticing cause and effect in your own experience. Did sitting still for 5 minutes create a little more space in your mind? Did it calm the nervous system even slightly? Did it give you a momentary break from the constant mental chatter? If yes, you've verified something important. The practice works. Not because someone told you it would, but because you experienced it directly. And that verification, that direct knowing, deepens interest in a way that belief never could. There's a teaching, understanding is the heartwood of well-spoken words. Truth isn't meant to be believed. It's meant to be understood, tested, lived. And when you start testing these teachings in your own life, when you start seeing for yourself how they work, interest becomes unshakable. Not because you're trying to maintain faith, but because you know. The second power is confidence. But not the kind of confidence we usually think of. Those who've walked contemplative paths for years notice something. The quality that best predicts who will transform isn't intelligence, or favorable circumstances, or even effort. It's emotional stability. The ability to keep going through both highs and lows. Think about what usually happens. You have a crisis, a loss, a heartbreak, a moment of overwhelming anxiety, and suddenly you're all in. meditating every day, reading Dharma books, attending teachings, sincerely committed to transformation. And then the crisis passes. Life gets a little easier. And slowly, the practice fades. Not because you decided to quit, just because the urgency is gone. But here's what's interesting. The same thing happens when things go really well. You get the promotion, you meet someone wonderful, everything in your life suddenly clicks into place, and the practice fades. Because now you don't need it. Or so it seems. You've been using the teachings like a hospital. Coming when you're broken, leaving when you're fixed. Using wisdom as aspirin, not as a path. This is why emotional stability matters so much. Because the path requires showing up regardless of how you feel. Practicing when you're inspired and when you're not. Continuing when it's hard and when it's easy. When life is falling apart and when everything's going great. And this kind of stability comes from a particular kind of confidence. Western psychology talks about self-esteem, building up a confident self. Buddhism offers something different. Confidence, not in a fixed self, but in potential. Not, I am great, but this mind has capacity for transformation. Do you feel the difference? One is about inflating an identity. The other is about recognizing what's possible. Every being, every single one, has what's called Buddha nature. It's not something you earn through good behavior or spiritual achievement. It's more like the potential of a seed. An acorn isn't an oak tree yet. But the oak is already there in potential, waiting for the right conditions. Water, soil, sunlight, time, give the acorn these conditions, and the oak will emerge. You're not lacking anything fundamental. You're unfolding. There's an image that might help here. Imagine a mirror covered in dust. The dust obscures the reflection, makes everything blurry and dim. But the mirror itself, the reflective surface, remains pristine underneath. The mind's essential nature is like that mirror. Vast, clear, capable of infinite development. Anger, confusion, fear, these are like dust on the surface. They obscure, but they don't corrupt. The mirror remains clear underneath. And this matters because it means you're not fundamentally broken. You're not trying to become something you're not. You're uncovering what's already there. This changes how you work with difficult emotions, difficult patterns, difficult moments. Instead of thinking, I need to eliminate anger because I'm an angry person, you think, anger is arising in this clear mind. It will pass, like dust settling, like clouds moving. I can work with this skillfully. There are 3 kinds of confidence worth cultivating. First, confidence in your capacity to overcome. Not, I will never feel anger again. That's unhelpful perfectionism that sets you up for failure. But I can learn to work with anger skillfully. I can shorten its duration. I can see it arising and choose a wiser response. This is where mindfulness becomes everything. Noticing is the beginning. When you see anger arising, just that seeing already creates space. In that space, choice becomes possible. Maybe you've experienced this. Someone says something that would normally set you off. But this time, you catch it. You notice the heat rising, the jaw clenching, the impulse to lash out. And in that noticing, something shifts. You're not swept away. You still feel the anger, but you're not possessed by it. You might still respond. You might still speak firmly, might still set a boundary. But you're doing it from choice, not from compulsion. This doesn't happen overnight. The first 100 times, you might notice the anger only after you've already reacted. Oh, I was angry. That's why I said that. That's fine. That's progress. Because noticing after is the foundation for noticing during, which is the foundation for noticing before. And each time you notice, the groove of awareness gets a little deeper. The gap between impulse and action gets a little wider. The possibility of choosing wisely gets a little stronger. The shift is gradual. So gradual you might not see it day to day. But look back over months, over years, and you'll see you're different. Not perfect. Not free from all reactivity. But more capable, more skillful, more free. Second, confidence in your capacity to develop. Every quality can be cultivated. Patience, kindness, clarity, joy. The mind is like a muscle. What you train grows stronger. If you train in worry, you become an expert at worry. Your mind gets really good at finding things to be anxious about, at spinning worst-case scenarios, at catastrophizing. If you train in noticing beauty, you become an expert at joy. Your mind gets really good at finding wonder in ordinary moments, at appreciating what's here, at resting in simple presence. It's not magic. It's conditioning. And the beautiful thing is, you get to choose what you condition. There's no ceiling except the ones we imagine. You can develop patience beyond what you currently think possible. You can develop wisdom that transforms your entire relationship to life. You can develop love that includes all beings without exception. But it must be real. It must be based on actual causes and conditions, not magical thinking. You don't develop patience by wishing for it or affirming it. You develop patience by practicing restraint when impatience arises. Again and again and again, until the mind learns a new way. This is gradual training. This is the path. Third, confidence in your capacity to help others. Even now, you can offer presence, kindness, a listening ear. You don't need to be enlightened to be helpful. You don't need to have it all figured out before you can show up for someone else. And as you develop inner stability, you naturally have more to offer. Those who've gone deep into practice discover something beautiful. The more peace you find, the more you want others to find it too. Not from obligation, not from should, not because some teaching told you to care about all beings, but from natural care, like wanting to share good news. When you discover something that genuinely helps, that actually reduces suffering, that brings real peace, of course, you want others to know about it. This isn't about becoming a teacher or taking on some grand mission. It's just about showing up with what you have. And what you have, right now, exactly as you are, is enough to make a difference. The third power is joy. And this might be the most misunderstood of all. We're trained to chase results. Get the degree, get the job, get the promotion, get the house, get the relationship, get the recognition. Always arriving somewhere other than here. And it's exhausting, because the arrival never quite satisfies. You get the thing you've been chasing, and there's a moment of relief, maybe even happiness. but it fades quickly. And then you're looking for the next thing to achieve, the next milestone to reach. The exhaustion of constantly pursuing future rewards is real. And it's unsustainable. Those who've mastered any craft, whether meditation, music, carpentry, or care, share something in common. They don't focus on outcomes. They focus on causes and conditions. They don't demand results. They create the conditions that make results inevitable. Think about a hard-boiled egg. Simple, right? You want a hard-boiled egg, so you get water, a pot, heat, an egg, and time. You bring the water to a boil. You put the egg in. You wait the appropriate number of minutes, and you get a hard-boiled egg. You don't hope for a hard-boiled egg. You don't pray for it, or visualize it, or try to manifest it through positive thinking. You create the conditions, and the egg has no choice but to cook. This is what the teaching of dependent origination means practically. Create the right causes and conditions, and the result arises naturally. Not through force, not through hope, through understanding how things work. This shifts everything about how you approach practice. You're not trying to force yourself to be peaceful. You're creating the conditions, stillness, silence, attention, that allow peace to arise naturally. You're not demanding that you never get angry. You're creating the conditions, awareness, patience, understanding, that make anger less likely and easier to work with when it does arise. The focus shifts from outcome to process, from achievement to alignment. And here's where something interesting happens. There's a teaching about going beyond hope and fear. This sounds strange at first. Hope feels precious. It's what gets us through hard times, isn't it? But Buddhist practice points to something more stable than hope. Equanimity. A deep calm that comes from understanding impermanence and meeting each moment with clarity. Hope always has fear as its shadow. When you hope for something, you fear not getting it. You're tossed between anticipation and anxiety, between maybe it will happen and what if it doesn't? This isn't peace. It's the opposite. There's a phrase you might have heard. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. The idea is that there's so much injustice in the world that if you're not outraged, you must be ignorant or complicit. That anger is the appropriate fuel for creating change. and there's a grain of truth there. Anger does energize. It does move us to action. But it's borrowed energy. And it comes with terrible side effects. Think about it. You need to be angry to care about injustice. You need to be anxious to be motivated. You need to be envious to have ambition. We've built our lives on these reactive emotions because we haven't developed our own fuel. There's a story that illustrates this perfectly. Two friends are at the beach. One of them throws the other's towel into the water as a joke. The friend whose towel is now soaked gets furious. He chases the other down the beach, determined to retaliate. But his friend is fast and stays just out of reach. Someone watching says, "Stop chasing him. Pretend you're not mad anymore. He'll relax, come closer, and then you can get him back." The angry friend responds, "If I wait too long, I won't be angry anymore, and then I won't want to hit him." Do you see it? He needs the anger to fuel the action. Without it, he wouldn't care enough to retaliate. And this is how so many of us live. We need anger to stand up for ourselves. We need anxiety to meet deadlines. We need envy to push ourselves to achieve. These emotions work. They move us. But they're exhausting, and they have terrible side effects. What if there's a better fuel? Instead of hope and fear, equanimity. Instead of chasing results, creating causes. Instead of emotional highs and lows, a steady presence that says, "I'll do what's wise and beneficial right now. I'll tend the garden. I trust the harvest will come in its time." This is where real joy lives. Not in achieving, but in aligning. When what you do matches what you value, when you're planting seeds you believe in, there's a quiet satisfaction that doesn't depend on outcomes. This isn't bypassing pain or pretending everything is fine. You can feel grief and still have this deeper okayness. You can acknowledge injustice and work to change it without being consumed by rage. You can face difficulty without losing your ground. It's finding a deeper stability beneath the waves of circumstance. There's a teaching you might have heard before. Happiness is a choice. When I first heard this, I was furious. If it were that simple, everyone would choose it. What an insult to suggest that suffering people just aren't choosing hard enough. But over time I understood what it actually means. It's not that circumstances don't matter. They do. Poverty is real. Illness is real. Loss is real. Injustice is real. But we've given circumstances all the power. We've made our inner state completely hostage to outer conditions. There are billionaires who despair. People who have everything by conventional measures and still can't find peace. And there are renunciants who own nothing, live simply, and radiate joy. The difference isn't in what they have. It's in where they place their attention, what they cultivate, what they choose to water. You can't choose your thoughts. They arise on their own, conditioned by everything that's come before. You can't choose your feelings. Sadness comes, anger comes, fear comes, not by invitation, but by causes and conditions. But you can choose gently, gradually, where you place your attention. You can choose what you water. The seeds of resentment are there. So are the seeds of gratitude. The seeds of complaint are there. So are the seeds of appreciation. Both are present. You choose which garden to tend. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't ignoring injustice or pretending pain doesn't exist. It's reclaiming agency over your inner life. And that agency develops through practice. There are 3 phases of meditation that almost everyone goes through. Phase 1 is the honeymoon. Everything is lovely. Such peace, such insights, such beautiful feelings. You think, this is it. I've found the answer. Why doesn't everyone meditate? Phase 2 is disillusionment. This is boring. My mind is chaos. I'm terrible at this. I quit. The initial excitement has worn off, and now you're face to face with the actual work. The mind that won't settle, the body that won't stop fidgeting, the thoughts that won't shut up. And this is where most sincere seekers abandon the path. Not because they're weak, not because they're incapable, but because they haven't yet developed their own fuel. They're still relating to practice like a TV show. Does this entertain me? Do I like it? Is it giving me good feelings? And when the answer is no, they conclude the practice doesn't work or they're not suited for it. But if you can get through phase 2, if you can keep practicing even when it's not fun, even when you can't see results, even when it feels pointless. You arrive at phase 3. Mature practice. This is where the teaching reveals itself. You practice not because it feels good, though sometimes it does. Not because you're supposed to, though consistency matters. You practice because you've chosen this. Because you understand what it's cultivating. Because it aligns with who you're becoming. This requires your own energy, not borrowed from anger or fear or hope. But the third power, joy that comes from alignment, not entertainment. And when you have that, nothing can shake you. The fourth power is moderation. And this is where many sincere practitioners sabotage themselves without realizing it. Here's the pattern. You get inspired. Maybe you attend a retreat, or read a book, or have a moment of clarity that shows you what's possible. And you think, this is it. I'm all in. I'm going to meditate 3 hours a day. I'm going to transform completely. Starting now. You set massive goals. You rearrange your whole schedule. You commit with everything you have. And for a week, maybe 2, you do it. You meditate for hours. You follow all the precepts perfectly. You're the model practitioner. And then you crash. Burned out, exhausted, resentful of the practice that felt so liberating just days ago. And you don't practice again for months. This cycle, inspiration, overcommitment, burnout, abandonment, is so common, it's almost universal. And it looks like dedication. It looks like taking the practice seriously. But it's actually a form of self-violence. The Buddha's very first teaching after his enlightenment was about this. The middle way. He tried extreme asceticism, starving himself, punishing his body, pushing himself to the edge of death, believing that suffering was the path to liberation. It didn't work. Then, before his ascetic period, he lived in luxury, every pleasure, every comfort, no restraint. That didn't work either. The path, he discovered, is neither extreme. It's the sustainable middle. Not indulgence, not deprivation, but a rhythm you can maintain, not just for days or weeks, but for years. for a lifetime. This isn't about limiting yourself. It's about honesty. Right now, today, with your actual life, your actual responsibilities, your actual energy level, what's sustainable? Not what sounds impressive. Not what you think you should be able to do. Not what someone else is doing. What can you actually maintain? There's a huge difference between the long game and the heroic burst. The heroic burst gets attention. 3 hours of meditation a day sounds serious, committed, worthy of respect. But 5 minutes a day for a year? That sounds almost trivial. Except one of these will actually change you, and the other won't. Better 5 minutes every day for a year than 3 hours once a month. Because transformation happens through consistency, not intensity. Through showing up again and again, not through occasional heroic efforts. Think about the decision budget we talked about earlier. Research in psychology confirms what contemplatives have known for centuries. We have a limited amount of quality, decision-making energy each day. Every choice depletes it a little. Some people spend 20 minutes in the morning choosing what to wear, trying on different combinations, checking the mirror, changing again. And then they wonder why they have no patience for their child at breakfast. Why they snap at their partner over something small. Why they can't focus at work. They've used up their decision-making capacity on something that doesn't actually matter to them. This is why simplification isn't about deprivation. It's about preservation. When you simplify the non-essential, you have energy for what matters. Einstein wore the same clothes every day so he could save his mental energy for physics. Not because he hated variety, but because he loved physics more. What do you love enough to simplify for? If genuine transformation matters to you, then simplify everything else. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. Reduce the decisions that don't serve your deepest values. Create routines that remove friction from what matters. Make the path of least resistance the path you actually want to walk. This is moderation in action. Not holding back out of fear or laziness, but choosing sustainability over intensity. Here's something worth considering. These 4 powers, interest, confidence, joy, moderation, They correspond to the 3 patterns we looked at earlier. If you're stuck in comfort and postponement, you probably need interest. You need to connect with why this matters, what's actually at stake, what becomes possible when you stop sleepwalking through life. If you're telling yourself you're incapable, that this isn't for people like you, you need confidence. Not in a fixed self, but in potential. In the mind's capacity to develop, to change, to unfold. If you're burned out or resentful, if you're pushing yourself with borrowed energy from obligation or fear, you need joy. You need to find the delight in the doing, the satisfaction that comes from alignment rather than achievement. And if you're cycling between heroic effort and collapse, between all-in commitment and complete abandonment, you need moderation. You need to find the sustainable rhythm, the middle way that you can walk, not just today, but for years to come. This week, if you'd like, just notice. No pressure to figure it out perfectly. No need to analyze or fix anything. Just gently notice, which of these 4 powers do you most need right now? Where's the edge for you? Where's the growing point? Maybe you have plenty of interest, but no confidence. You're fascinated by the teachings, but convinced you can't actually practice them. Maybe you have confidence, but no joy. You know you're capable. You're showing up consistently, but it feels like grinding, like forcing, like there's no lightness in it. Maybe you have both interest and joy, but no moderation. You keep burning yourself out with unsustainable intensity. Or maybe you have all 3, but they come and go with your mood, with circumstances, with whether life feels easy or hard. Just notice. Because noticing is the beginning of everything. These 4 powers aren't separate from you. They're not external tools you have to acquire or build from scratch. They're capacities you already have, just dormant, waiting to be remembered, practiced, strengthened. Like muscles that have atrophied from disuse. The muscle is there. It just needs training. When you cultivate interest, you're not importing something foreign. You're uncovering your natural curiosity, your innate desire to understand, to grow, to wake up. When you develop confidence, you're not inflating an ego. You're recognizing what's always been true, and that this mind has potential, that transformation is possible, that you're not fundamentally broken. When you find joy in practice, you're not manufacturing fake happiness. You're discovering the satisfaction that comes naturally when what you do aligns with what you value. And when you practice moderation, you're not limiting yourself out of weakness. You're honoring the truth of how transformation actually happens, gradually, sustainably, through patient consistency rather than heroic intensity. All of this is already in you, covered over perhaps by years of conditioning, by patterns that convinced you otherwise, by a world that teaches you to look outside yourself for what can only be found within. But it's there, waiting, like a seed in dark soil, like a mirror under dust, like potential in an acorn. All you have to do is create the conditions. Show up. Practice. Be patient with the process. Water the seeds. Wipe the dust from the mirror. Give the acorn time and soil and sun. And watch what unfolds. Not because you're special, or chosen, or different from anyone else, but because this is how minds work. This is how transformation happens. This is the path that countless others have walked before you, and countless others will walk after. You're not alone in this. You're part of a lineage of people who looked at suffering and said, "There must be another way." Who sat down in the midst of chaos and discovered stillness. Who faced their patterns with honesty and found they could change. Who kept showing up, day after day, year after year, until the path revealed itself. The four powers are your inheritance. Not something you have to earn or achieve or become worthy of. Just something you have to remember and practice and trust. Take a breath. Let this settle. There's no rush to implement everything at once. No pressure to have it all figured out right now. These teachings aren't going anywhere. They'll be here when you're ready. And you'll return to them again and again, each time understanding them a little more deeply, each time seeing something you missed before. That's how this works. Not in a straight line, not through perfect understanding, but through gradual deepening. Through showing up again and again with whatever you have, wherever you are. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but then undeniably, you change. The interest grows stronger. The confidence settles deeper. The joy becomes more consistent. The moderation finds its rhythm. and you find yourself walking a path you didn't know existed. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you uncovered it within yourself. One step at a time. One breath at a time. One choice at a time. When something goes wrong, a diet we couldn't stick to, a meditation practice that fizzled out after 3 days, a goal we abandoned before we really started, we usually blame the last step. I just didn't follow through. I lack discipline. I couldn't stay motivated. We think the problem is execution. And sometimes it is. But if we're honest, the real failure often came much earlier. Most people skip straight to plans and goals without understanding the actual situation they're in. They decide what they want to achieve without first assessing what they're actually working with. It's like trying to navigate with a map when you don't know where you are. The map might be excellent, but if you can't locate yourself on it, you have no idea which direction to walk. There are 4 phases to any endeavor. First, read the terrain. Understand where you actually are right now, what resources you have, what constraints you're working within. Second, set objectives based on that honest assessment. Not based on what sounds impressive or what you think you should want, but based on what's actually possible and meaningful given your terrain. Third, create a plan that bridges where you are to where you want to go. A realistic plan, not a fantasy plan. Fourth, implement. Take action. Do the thing. Most people start at step 3 or 4. They jump straight to making plans or taking action without the foundation of clear diagnosis. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. Reading your terrain means asking honest questions and giving honest answers. What are your current resources? Not the resources you wish you had, or the resources you think you should have. The ones you actually have right now. How much time do you genuinely have available? Not, I should be able to find time, but here are the actual hours in my day, here are my actual obligations, here's what's realistically available. How much energy do you have? Are you in a season of your life where you're depleted, running on fumes, barely keeping your head above water? Or are you in a season of relative ease, where you have surplus capacity? What support do you have? Do you live alone or with people who would encourage this practice? Do you have friends who understand what you're trying to do, or would you be doing this completely on your own? These aren't small questions. They shape everything that comes after. What's your current state? How's your physical health? Are you dealing with chronic pain, fatigue, illness? Because if you are, your practice needs to account for that, not pretend it doesn't exist. How's your mental health? Are you stable, or are you in crisis? Are you managing baseline anxiety and depression, or are you in acute distress? Again, no judgment here. Just clarity. Because the practice that serves someone in crisis is different from the practice that serves someone in stability. What are your current circumstances? What responsibilities do you have? Are you caring for children, for aging parents, for a partner who needs support? Are you working one job or two? Are you in school? Are you in transition? Your circumstances aren't excuses. They're the reality you're working with. And a practice that doesn't account for reality isn't wise, it's fantasy. What's your current understanding? What do you actually know about this path? Have you practiced before? Have you studied the teachings? Are you coming in completely new, or do you have a foundation to build on? And what are your current patterns? What's worked for you before? What hasn't? When you've tried to establish new habits in the past, what made them stick and what made them fall apart? This kind of honest assessment is rare. Most people skip it because they already know what they want to do. They've already decided they should meditate an hour a day, or go on a retreat, or study these texts. But when you approach practice this way, you're not reading the terrain. You're imposing your preferences on it. You're trying to make reality conform to your plan, instead of making your plan conform to reality. And reality always wins. When people ask for guidance, the first thing to understand is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Each person is a unique constellation of conditions. What works for one might harm another. Someone dealing with anxiety might need practices that ground and stabilize. Someone dealing with lethargy might need practices that energize and activate. Someone with a lot of time and few obligations might thrive with longer, more intensive practice. Someone with young children and a demanding job might need something they can do in 5-minute increments throughout the day. The right practice for you isn't the most advanced practice. It isn't the practice that sounds most impressive or that everyone else is doing. the right practice is the one that meets you where you actually are. There's a teaching that might help here. Imagine you need a blood transfusion. Your blood is contaminated, and you need it replaced with healthy blood. Now, if they drained all your blood out first, and then tried to refill you with clean blood, you'd die in the process. The cure would kill you. So instead, they do it gradually. Pure blood flows in through one arm, while contaminated blood flows out through the other. Slowly, over time, the ratio shifts. You're getting cleaner and cleaner blood, but you're never at risk of complete depletion. This is the Buddhist path. Gradual transformation. Introducing wisdom, kindness, and clarity, while slowly releasing confusion, reactivity, and harm. Not dramatic purging, not violent upheaval, just gentle, sustainable shift. This matters because many people approach practice like they're trying to drain all the blood at once. They want to eliminate all their negativity immediately. They want to become completely different people overnight. They want transformation now, fully and completely. And when that doesn't happen, when they still get angry, when they still feel fear, when they still struggle, they think they've failed. But the path isn't perfection. It's direction. Someone once asked the Buddha, "In this world, isn't everything we do going to cause some harm? Even eating vegetables means insects died in the harvest. How can we truly be good?" The Buddha's teaching wasn't perfectionism. It was the middle way. Do your best to minimize harm. Choose the kinder option. Know that perfect purity isn't possible in a shared, interdependent reality, but that doesn't mean all choices are equal. You vote for the less harmful candidate, even when neither is ideal. You buy from the more ethical company, even when no company is perfectly ethical. You speak with more care even when you can't be perfectly skillful yet. This is the path. Better, then better still. Not perfect, but genuinely better. Every choice is a chance to move in the direction of less harm, more wisdom, greater care. Not because you'll arrive at perfection, but because direction matters more than arrival. One of the ego's favorite tricks is binary thinking. All or nothing. Success or failure. Enlightened or hopeless. The Buddhist path rejects this completely. The question isn't, am I enlightened? The question is, did I take one step toward freedom today? Just one step. Not 1,000 steps. Not the final step. Just one step in the right direction. This completely changes how you approach practice. Imagine someone comes to you and says, I want to meditate 45 minutes every day. Then in a month, I'll increase to an hour. And by autumn, I want to do a month-long retreat. And you ask, have you meditated before? No, not really. I tried it once or twice, but I couldn't focus. So how do you know 45 minutes is right for you? Have you sat for 5 minutes and noticed what actually happens in your mind and body? Usually, the answer is no. They're building a plan on fantasy, not experience. Start where honesty lives. If you haven't meditated in months, or ever, your goal isn't an hour a day. Your goal is 5 minutes, 3 times this week. That's it. Do that, and you've succeeded. Not do 5 minutes as a stepping stone to the real goal of an hour. No. 5 minutes is the goal. Complete in itself. And when you do it, you build evidence. Evidence that you can show up, that you can follow through, that you're capable. Then next week, maybe you do 5 minutes 4 times. Or you do 6 minutes 3 times. Small increments built on success. This is completely different from the fantasy approach, where you commit to massive change, feel great about your commitment for exactly 1 day, and then crash into failure. Build from success, not fantasy. Your goals should align across time frames. If your long-term goal is inner peace, your medium-term goal might be learning to meditate consistently, and your short-term goal is sitting still for 5 minutes today. These are aligned. They're the same path, just different distances. But here's what misalignment looks like. Long-term goal, inner peace. Medium-term goal, proving yourself at work, climbing the ladder, making more money than your colleague. Short-term goal, winning an argument online with a stranger you'll never meet. These pull in different directions. They're not the same path at different distances. They're different paths entirely. and you'll exhaust yourself trying to walk them all at once. So look at your goals honestly. Are they aligned? Do they point in the same direction? Or are you trying to walk north and south simultaneously, wondering why you never seem to get anywhere? These teachings didn't come easily. They cost years of confusion, trial and error, suffering that didn't need to happen. If even one idea here saves you some of that pain, if it helps you move forward with a little more clarity, a little less struggle, that's why this teaching exists. Not to create Buddhists, not to build a religion or a following, to reduce suffering. That's all. If these teachings help, use them. If they don't, set them aside. There's no obligation, no requirement that you adopt any of this. The only question that matters is, does this reduce suffering? Does this create more freedom, more clarity, more peace? If yes, keep going. If no, try something else. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. You need to do one thing, one small, genuine thing that aligns with freedom instead of habit. What's one thing? No pressure to answer right now. Just an invitation to notice. Maybe it's sitting still for 5 minutes tomorrow morning. Maybe it's pausing before you reach for your phone. Maybe it's taking 3 conscious breaths before you respond to that email that made you angry. One thing. Small and genuine. That's where transformation begins. Imagine you're hired to play music at an event. You show up with access to 100,000 songs, every genre, every era, every mood. Now, the amateur brings their favorite playlist and forces everyone to listen to it. This is great music. Everyone should love this. But the professional does something different. They read the room. They notice, is this a wedding? A retirement party? A corporate event? Who's here? What's the energy? They start with their best guess based on the context. But then they watch. Are people dancing? Are they sitting down? Are they talking among themselves, ignoring the music entirely? Are they leaving the room? And based on what they see, they adjust. Not, this is the music I like, so this is what I'll play. But what does this moment need? What serves these people in this situation right now? They're serving the moment, not their preferences. This is how to approach truth-telling, how to work with speech, how to show up in relationships. In one basket, you hold all the truths you know. And in any moment, you select which truths serve this situation, this person, this need. Not lying, not hiding, but discerning. Your grandmother gets a new hairstyle. It doesn't suit her. She asks what you think. Do you say, "It looks terrible"? Maybe that's true. But is it kind? Is it beneficial? Is it timely? The Buddha taught that speech should be true, kind, beneficial, and timely. All four. If something is true but unkind and not beneficial, if it would hurt without helping, silence might be wiser. Or you might find a truth that's kinder. It's so nice to see you trying something new. I love that you're experimenting. Both true. Both kind. One serves the moment better than the other. This isn't dishonesty. It's wisdom. The danger is arriving at any situation with fixed ideas of what you'll say or do. I'm going to tell them exactly what I think, no matter what. I'm going to be completely honest, even if it hurts. This is ego's game. Trying to control, predict, dominate the moment according to its preferences. Real compassion is responsive. It meets what's actually happening, not what you planned for or hoped for. Honesty with yourself is the foundation. You must see clearly what's true, the whole truth, not just the convenient parts. But then you serve what's needed, not what's easiest for you, not what makes you look good, not what protects your comfort. What actually helps? Sometimes that means gentle silence. Your friend is grieving, and they say something you know isn't quite accurate about the person they lost. Do you correct them? Maybe later. Maybe never. But right now, in this moment of raw grief, correction isn't what serves. Presence serves. Listening serves. Holding space serves. Sometimes that means difficult honesty. Your friend is harming themselves with a pattern they can't see. They keep making the same choice that leads to the same suffering, and they genuinely don't understand why their life keeps falling apart. Do you stay silent to avoid discomfort? Or do you speak the truth they need to hear, even knowing it might hurt, might create distance, might cost the friendship? Wisdom knows the difference. And wisdom doesn't come from following rules. It comes from practice. From showing up again and again in real situations with real people, making your best guess, watching what happens, learning from what works and what doesn't. From reading the room, adjusting the music, serving the moment. The question isn't, is this a white lie or the truth? The question is, what serves awakening? What reduces harm? What builds trust and connection while being fundamentally honest? And the answer changes depending on the situation. Which is why you can't arrive with a fixed formula. Why you can't decide ahead of time exactly what you'll say or do. You can only show up present, aware, and willing to respond to what's actually needed. This is harder than following rules. It requires actual attention, actual discernment, actual care. But it's also more alive, more real, more human. And it's the only way to navigate a world this complex, this interconnected, this constantly changing. You read the terrain. You set appropriate objectives. You make a realistic plan. You implement with presence and flexibility. And when something doesn't work, you don't blame yourself for lack of willpower or discipline. You go back to the beginning. You read the terrain again. You adjust the objectives. You revise the plan. This is how transformation actually happens. Not through heroic willpower forcing reality to bend to your vision, but through patient, honest, responsive engagement with what actually is. One step at a time. One choice at a time. One moment at a time. Until you look back and realize you've come so far. Not because you were special or chosen or different, but because you kept showing up with honesty, with patience, with willingness to begin again. And that's enough. More than enough. Remember, karma means intentional action. When you choose freely, when you meditate because you understand its value, when you speak kindly because you've cultivated that capacity, when you respond with patience because you've trained in restraint, you're creating karma. You're planting seeds that will grow into future conditions. But when you're forced by circumstances, when the doctor says, change your diet or die in 6 months, when you only become generous because you're ashamed not to be, when you practice only because crisis has backed you into a corner, there's little karmic power in that action. You're being pushed, not choosing. And the difference matters more than you might think. Imagine 2 people. The first person is in their 30s, relatively healthy, with no major health concerns. They start paying attention to what they eat, not because anything's wrong, but because they value their body, because they want to have energy and vitality as they age, because they understand that health is easier to maintain than to recover. The changes are gradual. More vegetables, less processed food, better sleep. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent. Just steady choices in the direction of well-being. The second person ignores all the signs. The fatigue, the weight gain, the blood pressure creeping up, the doctor's concerned suggestions. Until one day, the doctor delivers an ultimatum. Your cholesterol is dangerously high. Your blood sugar is pre-diabetic. If you don't make major changes now, you're looking at a heart attack within the year. Now they change. Radically. Everything at once. No sugar, no processed foods, strict calorie limits, mandatory exercise. Both people end up making similar changes. Both eat better, move more, take care of their health. But which person do you think has an easier path? Which one generates more positive momentum? The first person is building strength. Every choice reinforces their sense of agency, their confidence that they can shape their life through conscious decisions. The second person is operating under threat. Every choice is tinged with fear, with resentment, with the exhausting effort of forcing themselves to do something they haven't actually chosen in their heart. Both might succeed, but one is planting seeds of empowerment. The other is white-knuckling their way through changes they feel victimized by. Karma, the natural unfolding of cause and effect, first invites. It whispers, "This pattern is causing suffering. Would you like to shift it?" The whisper might be a slight unease in your gut when you reach for your phone for the 100th time today. It might be a small voice suggesting that maybe you don't need that third drink. It might be noticing that you always feel worse after scrolling social media. Never better. If we ignore the whisper, it speaks louder. The unease becomes anxiety. The suggestion becomes concern. The noticing becomes impossible to ignore. Still ignored, it shouts. Relationships start falling apart. Health starts declining. Work performance suffers. The things you've been avoiding catch up. And finally, if the shout is ignored, it demands. The heart attack happens. The divorce papers arrive. The breakdown comes. Change is no longer optional. The secret to a wise life? Respond to whispers. Change when it's still a choice. When you can make gentle adjustments instead of desperate overhauls. When you can build from a foundation of well-being instead of clawing your way out of crisis. This whole teaching, these 4 powers, this understanding of the patterns that block us, is about how to have the motivation, the drive, the urgency that usually only comes in crisis while you're still in a time of relative peace. How to change while change is still gentle. How to grow while you still have space to breathe. This is the gift of practice. Not that it makes you superhuman, or perfect, or immune to difficulty, but that it gives you access to emergency energy without needing an emergency to trigger it. You can choose transformation today, freely, with your whole heart, or you can wait until life forces it on you tomorrow, desperately, with no other options left. Both paths lead to change, but only one plants seeds of freedom. Sometimes we look at people who seem naturally wise, naturally peaceful, and we think they're special. They're different from me. They have something I don't have. But here's what the Buddhist tradition teaches. No one is born complete. Every quality you admire in another person was cultivated. Every moment of peace they experience came from training. Every wise response arose from choosing, again and again, to act wisely. There's a teaching called Buddha nature. Every being has the potential for complete awakening. Not will definitely become enlightened. That's not guaranteed. but has the capacity. Like every acorn can become an oak given the right conditions. Water, soil, sunlight, time, these conditions aren't optional. The acorn won't become an oak in a drawer, no matter how long you wait. But given the right conditions, the potential that was always there unfolds. You might be at a different point on the path than someone you admire. You might have different obstacles to work with, different patterns to untangle, different karma to meet. But you are not less than. Your mind has the same fundamental capacity for transformation, for freedom, for love. This isn't pressure. You don't have to become a master or a saint. You don't have to achieve some extraordinary state that only a few special people can reach. But you also don't have to settle for suffering. You have options, real options, right now. Kindness isn't something foreign you have to import from outside. It's already in you, waiting to be watered. You felt kindness towards someone you love, toward a child, toward an animal, toward a stranger having a hard day. That capacity exists. The question is just whether you cultivate it or let it remain dormant. Clarity isn't a superpower. It's the mind's nature when confusion settles. You've experienced moments of clarity, when the answer to a problem suddenly became obvious, when you saw a situation for what it truly was, when the fog lifted and everything made sense. That clarity is your birthright. It just gets obscured by the constant noise, the endless commentary, the accumulated confusion. You're not building a new self. You're uncovering what was always there, buried under habit and fear. We've walked through a lot together. The weight we carry, that exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, that gap between who we are and who we sense we could be. The patterns that block us, comfort seeking that becomes numbing, distraction that masquerades as productivity, self-doubt that locks us in place. The four powers within us, interest that compels, confidence that steadies, joy that sustains, moderation that makes it real. None of this is meant to overwhelm you. It's meant to clarify, to show you that what feels impossible, changing, growing, finding genuine peace, is actually a path that countless others have walked. Not because they were special, because they showed up. You don't need to remember everything you heard here. You don't need to implement it all at once, or do it perfectly. You just need to take one step. Maybe tomorrow morning, you sit still for 5 minutes before reaching for your phone. Maybe you pause before reacting to something that usually triggers you immediately. Maybe you choose to water the seeds of gratitude instead of the seeds of complaint, just once, just to see what happens. One step. Small and genuine. And then another. And another. Not because you're trying to arrive at some final destination, not because you're racing toward enlightenment, but because each step matters. Each step plants a seed. Each choice creates conditions. Each moment of awareness carves a little groove that makes the next moment of awareness more possible. The path is gradual, gentle, sustainable, like a transfusion, not a purge. Like spring arriving, not a sudden revolution. And it's available to you right now, exactly as you are, with everything you're carrying, with all your confusion and fear and doubt. You're not too broken for this. You're not too far gone. You're not uniquely incapable. You're just human. And this path was made for humans. So take a breath. Feel your body in this moment, in this space. Notice that you're here, that you listened, that something in you was interested enough to stay present for this long. That's not nothing. That's the first power already awakening. The seeds are planted. The conditions are gathering. What grows from here is up to you. Not through force, not through perfection, but through patient, honest, gentle choosing. One moment at a time. One breath at a time. One step at a time. Until you look back and realize you're not the same person who started this journey. And the path ahead, though still long, feels possible in a way it never did before. Welcome home.